All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Justin. I'm the interim group manager for the plan stage. I'm here with the rest of the plan team. I don't know if y'all want to introduce yourself quickly.
Sure. I'm Kristen. I have the product planning team, so we work on epics and boards and roadmaps.
I'm Gabe, project management, issues, iterations, labels, all that fun team planning stuff.
And I'm Mark, working on the requirements, quality management areas of Certify.
Awesome. So we're going to spend a few minutes today walking through our kickoff, what we have planned for 13.10. So Kristen, I'll hand it over to you to kick us off with product planning.
Sure. I'm just going to share my screen here. So for 13.10, we have a few items scheduled here. I'm just going to jump over to my issue. We have been working on epic boards for a while now, and we have MVC1 that's in flight. We're going to keep working on that in MVC1. We had hoped to get it in 13.9, but it's going to be in 13.10. And in terms of the overall MVC breakdown for epic boards, I'm just going to open up the parent epic here. We are looking at, right now, this might change, but we're looking at delivering the entirety of epic boards in the 14.0 release. So you can see that when we go out with MVC1, it will be just creating and viewing the boards. Then we'll add reordering and adding and creating epics within the boards. And then by 14.0 or maybe 14.1, no promises, but we're tracking to that. We'll have the entirety of parity with issue boards. So that's the goal. So for this release though, 13.10, it will be MVC1 and part of MVC2. We also achieved our 3,900 active users for Epic creation in this last release, which was a big success. So we are retooling to track all Epic interactions. So that's another focus of this next release, and making sure that we're getting all of the user interactions, whether they're editing, epics, commenting on them, all of those good things into our main Gmail statistics. We don't have any slated bugs right now. The team is still working on that, so that's TBD. But we're also going to tackle some of our P2, P3 ones that we have in our backlog. And so that's it for the product planning team.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. We have a couple of questions. I'll start with the first one. So I'm curious, so for MVC1, which you said looks like you're targeting 13.10, how will customers be able to try it out once it's available?
Yeah, so we're actually going to release it in the release post with instructions for how they can enable the feature flag and or remove the feature flag, so they'll be able to get it. So and also we'll be testing it on .com for GitLab, and we'll be reaching out to some of our customers who have high interest in that right now and want to view their epics on a board. So we'll be doing a little bit of outreach and getting beta feedback from them. It won't be that useful. You'll really just be seeing them there. So like for right now, we really want to set that expectation as well, that it's not going to have parity with what they're expecting from using issue boards.
But I'll be able to view my epics on a board, right?
Yeah, and
turn that feature flag on, and
yeah, and you can swap labels in the sidebar, which would move them from list to list, but you wouldn't be able to drag and drop yet.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Gabe, you have the next one.
Yeah, I was just curious how, because I honestly haven't looked into this yet, how we're handling the hierarchical nature of epics. Like, are we just showing epics that have issues associated? Like, how are we going to visualize that on a board view?
Yeah, so Alexis is working on that, but for right now, we're just going to have them as cards initially when we roll out, and then we'll tackle the hierarchy later. Because it's going to be important to show that. I'm not exactly sure yet how we will when we have the sub epics on there along with their parents. For right now, they'll just be top level objects like an issue.
Cool. Yeah, I think when we were talking about the defining relationships between types of issues, that's one way that would provide a kind of clear UI for traversing down your tiers and hierarchy. So that's exciting to explore that further.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Gabe. Looks like I have the last question for product planning. First off, congratulations on hitting the target the Gmail target. Super awesome
Thank you.
result. I was curious. So you're mentioning tracking all types of interactions on epics. I know that we don't necessarily use each interaction on epics to show up on your contribution graph. So I'm curious, these may be unrelated and it's totally okay, but I'm curious if you've considered adding those interactions as contributions on a user's profile in addition to tracking for analytics
That's
purposes.
a good idea. I have not, but I should go through the list. It's quite a long list, like editing dates, editing labels. So we would have to figure out if it meets the definition for a contribution.
Right.
Because I know right now, I think like issues and MRs, there's like a bar you have to reach, but that's a really good call out there that we should actually just track down and make sure that all of them are tracking over to the user activity.
Yeah.
I think there was.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No. I was just gonna say I think there was an issue in Slack somewhere that we can try to dig up, but I think one of the challenges with that is I'm not sure how complex it's going to be to add. Like, basically, we have events model that's used for issues and merge requests, which makes it easy to show events or activities on your profile, but that doesn't exist for epics. And so I'm curious, like, if there is some overlap there. Anyway, just bring it up because there was a discussion that's really relevant to that in Slack yesterday, or the day before.
This also might be a good segue into extensible issues, right, Gabe?
But
thanks, Kristen. Definitely nothing we're planning on actioning on in this milestone, but I was just curious now that you're going to be able to track them. Be curious to see how many interactions on the different types of things you can do in an epic exist. Right now, we're only tracking creation, so excited to be able to see more.
There's like 20. I just linked it, so we'll see.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you. If there's no other questions on this one, let's toss it over to Gabe for project management.
Sounds good. Here's my section for the 13.10 release. I think one of the key themes that we're trying to focus on as an organization is usability. So a lot of the three themes that I have all link directly to SUS feedback, as well as to opportunities for improving MAU, and also directly to customer ARR. So it's kind of interesting how they all correspond. But the first major theme that we're going to continue working on is planning work with iterations. We made progress refactoring how we add lists to boards in this previous milestone. And next, we're going to be able to add an iteration via the new list addition UI, which is going to look similar to this. So excited about that. It will be a huge win for people that are using iterations because they can more easily schedule and sequence work out across many iterations. Complemented well with Epic swim lanes and some of the other things that are out there. It's going to be a pretty awesome enhancement. Along with iterations, we're kind of the problem is that there are lots of times where a group will be shared with multiple teams. GitLab's a good example where we have like all of the product development teams working out of the same project, same group. And one of the things that's difficult with iterations right now is that you can't have multiple different iteration cadences. So each team can basically have their own schedule. And also they're not automated. And so one of the things that we've been working on and we'll start to make visible progress on in 13.10 is rolling out kind of a new way to support multiple iteration cadences at the group level that kind of flow down to subgroups. And then once that's sort of in place and the backend work, I think is pretty much done for this, extending that to enable so that you can automatically schedule it and select a start date, the duration for your iterations, selecting to automatically roll issues over from one completed iteration to the next, and then how many future iterations to schedule. So basically with all these things enabled, it will allow us to more or less automate the management of iteration lists within boards and all sorts of other fun things. And then once this is in play, we'll move on to integrating velocity into iterations and into boards as well so that we can plan more effectively. The next kind of major theme is sort of around the extensible issues. Some of the things that we're doing right now and our plan for in 13.10 is filtering issue by issue type in boards and issue lists. So we already have a type column in our issue model, and it's being shared basically with incidents right now. And in order for incidents to not rely on the incident label anymore, so they'll show up on boards properly, we need to actually be able to support by type within boards. So you can have a board that's scoped to a specific type of issue, whether that's an incident or normal issue now or in the future, an epic or requirement or a test case, whatever the use case may be. But this is sort of getting ahead of what we know we have to do anyways by also supporting another team and unblocking them. And then we're going to be starting work on customizable issue types. So the end user will be able to more or less create different types of issues that they want. And right now it's going to be pretty simple, just like basic. I want to create a feature. We're not customizing fields on it, doing anything like that. Very small, more or less have different types, assign that type to different issues. And that's the kind of first base step that is going to unblock a lot of these interesting things. I think the first MVC, we're not going to go with customized icons, but eventually we're going to want to support being able to select different icons that relate to different issue types so that they will show up in the UI. I think let's see here, we're also going to be doing some backend spikes on converting other objects like epics and requirements into a type of issue. In terms of our last major theme, we have usability, infra performance, thus feedback, quality of life improvements, sort of a big bucket of all the things that we need to make better in the product that exists. One of those things that we're going to be working on is the OR filter. This is pretty far along, but it's going to behave sort of like this on the filters. If you want to do assignees, you can say is, and then you can have a multi-select option in your list. So that way it will pop it in and treat it as an OR filter. So again, the backend piece, I think, is just about done, where we're actually able to sort by OR in a query parameter in the URL. We just need to build the UI, which is being added upstream to Pajama, so that all the views that use these filters, filter bar, can benefit from the OR filtering as well. Another thing that we will be delivering fully in 13.10 is group level description templates for issues and merge requests. Epics will be in a future iteration. But this will more or less enable you to, there's a couple of things we don't need to show them, set it the instance level where you want your templates to be drawn from, which will propagate all the way down your hierarchy, or you can override that at the group level if you want. And so this will enable people who have hundreds of projects within a group to set one basically repository where their templates are, and that be available to all their groups when they're all their projects when creating issues. And then the last thing that we're going to be doing is iterating on our delayed deletion of projects. Right now, it's super expensive if something gets accidentally deleted. One of the, I think, promises that we make to customers in our contracts is that if you're a premium up and something accidentally gets deleted, we will help you restore your data as best to our ability, which is super expensive for infra. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing to support this is basically making it so that when you delete a project, you can immediately reuse the path name of the project that's being scheduled for deletion, better supporting the ability to override that and automatically basically delete a project that is scheduled for delayed deletion. There's compliance reasons. And then the other thing is making it so that groups can properly inherit and set the interval for when they want things to be delayed, and like basically from when you schedule an issue or a project for delayed deletion to when it actually happens. And kind of giving more control to the end user, because right now it is an instance level setting and it's available at groups, but we can't default it on at the instance level to protect, basically add that layer of protection for GitLab.com, because there's not enough configurability at the group level. So we need to kind of provide that level of configurability so that customers that do want to use delayed deletion can, customers that don't have to. And it's sort of, I think this would also fit into the bucket of parity between GitLab.com and self-managed. So that's what we have on the burner for project management and 13.10.
Very cool. Thanks, Gabe. Questions, Kristen? You have the first one.
Yeah, you may have said this briefly, but with your converting plan objects over to extensible issues, what would be a good object that you're considering to be a first one out of the gates with that?
I defer to engineering. Engineering hasn't indicated specifically which object they would want to start with. I think the requirements might make sense. The thing that we'd have to abstract there is the relationship between a requirement and how that works when you basically tie it to an actual test in the code base and making sure that all that stuff works well. But again, like I completely defer to the engineering approach on how they want to do this. And that's where I've sort of asked them in this release, like, can you come up with an architecture blueprint so that we're all on the same page? We know how we want to tackle this. And basically the technical risk is reduced quite a bit. So that's the next step.
Cool. Thanks, Gabe. I have the next question on multiple iteration cadences. If I was a customer, how would I sort of name, you mentioned, each team could have their own cadence, which is great. I think that's a great improvement. How should I consider naming those cadences if I'm a customer and I have, say, multiple teams that want slightly different cadences? Is it a label or is it just a naming scheme?
It's just a naming scheme. So I'll share my screen real quick. Right now, you can name every single iteration. What we're going to move to in this kind of new model is you name your kind of set of iterations, your cadence, and then the iteration itself is going to be identifiable by the date range and by a number. So the sequence of iteration it is. So that way, like you can name it, if you want to have something for fulfillment, you could name it fulfillment iterations and it would show up in this drop down like that. And then
I would see
eventually,
the dates. Cool.
Yep. And then eventually we're integrating, sorry, Holly's working on some of this stuff right now, but basically a way to scope a board directly to an iteration cadence. So that way, like you can basically have the board represent just one cadence of iterations. Cool. So that's how we're going to tackle that.
Very cool. Thank you.
Super cool. I have a follow-on to that. From your perspective with customers, how are they viewing this new iteration feature versus the milestone feature that we already have?
They're super excited about it because usually teams will track against, a milestone is something that's in the distant future, kind of longer term type thing. And then an iteration is more of like, hey, here's a specific time box we want to get this done in. So now they're able to tie an issue both to their playing cadence as well as to like some sort of important business function, which technically is what a milestone is supposed to be in the future. Milestones right now don't have to have dates, can have dates. You can have multiple overlapping. So they're actually excited that they have the proper framework for doing their Scrum-based planning or the time box-based planning, as well as being able to use as I said, or read in a couple issues, use milestones for what they're meant for, which is more strategic things.
That's awesome. I can't wait.
Cool. Gabe, I think you actually answered my fourth question. I was going to ask, what do you think the team will accomplish in regards to accessible issues for the milestone? I think you answered that it looks like the plan is for them to spike into it and start to come up with some designs and architecture and kind of start to think about which issue they want to bring or which issue will they want to bring over. So if that's not what I heard, then please correct me, but I think I got that one answered.
You're right. There's two things. There's a spike for actually converting things like epics and requirements to a type of issue. And then there's the ability for end users. I don't know if we'll be able to finish it in 13.10, but we're starting in earnest on the engineering for end users to be able to create their own customizable types. Right.
Okay.
So that's sort of like you sort of have to have both, I think, in the long run. We can keep hard coding types if we want, but ultimately it's to give the flexibility to customers to do it themselves.
Yep. Makes perfect sense. Cool. I didn't have a question here, but I'm just super excited about the OR operator. So can't wait to be able to use that myself.
Me too. After that's in place, the next thing in that framework is save filters and searches. So instead of using bookmarks, you can just save a filter and just click and go. So that's where we're going with that.
Literally life-changing. Can't wait.
Yep.
Excellent.
All right, Mark, you're up next. Bring us home with Certify.
Sounds good. Throughout the release here, the teams worked really hard doing a spike into, the next steps for requirements management. And it kind of dovetails into what Gabe was saying with the idea of converting to an issue type. So that's sort of on the radar for the Certify team to convert requirements to an issue type. We're still trying to determine how that's going to work, as Gabe mentioned, with linking to other things. So while we complete that spike, the team really wanted to have a bug fix release. And this is actually a really good thing. It shows that a lot of people are using the Certify features right now, and they're coming up and finding some of these little bugs that have kind of been plaguing it for a while. So I've gone ahead and prioritized about 2/3 of the release is going to be bug fixes. I've prioritized them by severity and priority. So you can see there's a list of them here within the issue where we're really hoping to kind of knock out a bunch of these bugs. There's also going to be a documentation update, and this is really important. There was some reviewer guidance that was missing around community contributions. So we're actually going to go ahead and update that for everybody at GitLab just to understand how these reviews should take place for community contributions and for database review, just to ensure that we're not not using those community contributions to the best of our ability. And this was kind of a problem we ran into, and we just want to fix it for everybody. So made sure to schedule that as well. There are a couple of features we want to talk about briefly here. Right now, Service Desk participants, now that you can add participants to a Service Desk issue, one of the things we want to make sure is available is the ability for them to opt out of receiving updates via email. So what we're looking to do is add a link to the email that they receive that allows them to opt out of future updates from that issue. There's also a situation we ran into where the Service Desk email send and receive feature wasn't working for a few days, and nobody really noticed it. So we want to implement some service level indicators here for that, just to make sure that we're maintaining a quality of service for our customers. So those are the two things we're going to tackle this month while we complete the spike into how to handle requirements management and linking requirements to test cases.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I had the first question. I noticed a bug fix or a small, maybe quality of life improvement tooltips on import and export buttons made me think, do you have any data or any sort of anecdotal evidence on how much usage the import export requirements feature is getting?
The import export actually, while we're not tracking it formally just yet, we're working to do that. There's some issues. We want to get it into Redis counter so that we're not tracking it only on .com or only in self-managed. So we're kind of looking at doing that. But right now, I have received a lot of anecdotal evidence from a couple of our customers that they're really enjoying that feature, especially the export. This is really critical. It's enabling that round trip workflow where they can import requirements in, have their software team work entirely within GitLab, satisfying requirements, and then export those back out to any top level documentation they need. So that's been anecdotal evidence, very popular.
Great. Gabe, you had the next one.
Yeah, I was just thinking about one of the things that I like that you've done with requirements to date was when you create a new requirement, it basically slides out a little window instead of taking you a whole page and then reloading and all this other stuff. I'm wondering if we should explore making that like the status quo for issues of all kinds, just because it is nice. And I know that there's also basically the creation form is duplicated in lots of places. So it's an effort to also pay down technical debt. Having consolidated create type issue type form would be awesome, and curious what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we actually talked about briefly, and I think that's something that's really important. When we went ahead and did that, we were trying to avoid that typical form-based entry where you can't really see what's there on the screen. You have to go to a whole new screen, enter your requirement. I would love to see that incorporated all over the place. I do recognize that some users, when they enter like larger issues, may want to have a full screen view. I don't think it would be too difficult to add a button on there or something that says, open a new window or something like that, where they can get that experience if that's what they're looking for. But the slide out is super convenient for requirements and any other sort of quick entry. So I would love to take that across all the issue types as an option.
Yeah, I think that could solve a lot of problems, not just in the list view, but also like in a board view. Because when you have those quick create like things, it doesn't let you set any metadata. So you have to open that issue or whatever it is already to like add all the things that you want. And you can't even use quick actions because there's no description field. So it'd be cool to have that be like a standard experience for viewing and also creating as the sort of like slide out mechanics maybe. So let's explore that.
Yeah, the team did an excellent job on that. I'd love to expand that out.
Me too.
Yeah, I agree on that too. That would be amazing for boards. I'm just curious. I know you're doing the SLS work for Service Desk because it went down and you weren't sure what was going on. Are you having to duplicate what's already exists on issues in terms of those kinds of notifications for things going down, or it's just when you get issue types, would that solve it for you? I'm just curious.
No, this was actually one of the back end services at on.com went down. This was our email handler for that went down, and there's issues don't really have the same sort of situation where they're not receiving issues over email. So it was one of those things where it went down for a couple of days and we were alerted to it by a customer, which was fantastic. We were able to bring it back online very easily, but it made us realize that we should have some sort of monitoring in place. Just because it's a feature that's a little bit harder to track, you have to actually like send an email and verify it created an issue. There's that linkage there is where it went down. The email server was fine, email was working fine, issue creation was working fine, but that thing that ties them together is where we were seeing problems. So it's a very specific use case tied mainly to the Service Desk, but it is something we're trying to fix.
It's a different application, right, Mark? If I remember seeing this correctly.
Yeah.
And then GitLab the application. So I think, Chris, your question, the issue type or extensible issues will be in the GitLab application, which will keep the same monitoring and sort of SLIs that exist for the main application.
Right.
So we should be
Makes
covered
sense.
there, I think. Yeah. Cool. That's the end. Thank you everyone for watching and look forward to seeing everything that we can get done this milestone.